thought, well, maybe they can just go in, cut the tumor out, and everything will be okay, back to normal.
The oncologist's exact words, if you do not do any treatment, I won't see you here next year.
He had a very aggressive cancer.
The survival rate was, I think they said 30 to 40%.
Chemotherapy typically does not work for this type of cancer.
Oh, it's devastating. I was scared to death. No matter how dark your life is, there's always another way out.
Sometimes we inherit things we'd rather not, like defective genes. Shad Kohler's father was seriously ill with Gardner's syndrome. This hereditary genetic disease caused benign tumors to grow unchecked on his internal organs. When Shad was 15, tests confirmed he had the same genetic makeup as his father, which put him at risk of also developing the disorder. What Shad didn't know at the time was that Gardner's syndrome would be overshadowed by another, more daunting adversary.
I remember my dad and my mom were talking about him having blood in his stool. And they did a colonoscopy. They found hundreds and hundreds of polyps in his large intestine. In 1982, they removed his large intestine.
Desmoid tumors are large tumors that can occur in anybody, but they particularly occur in patients with Gardner syndrome.
After the surgery, everything was okay. Following year, he was doing good. He was working. And then in 1983, he got a scan done. And that's when they found that he had several tumors.
They're large, fibrous tumors that occur throughout the abdomen. They're very difficult to take care of.
He cut out as much of that tumor as they could. He would be doing good. They would do a scan. They would find another tumor, or what they call like a pus pocket, and had to put a tube on his side. He had all these bags and tubes in them, so he would have to change his bags out every day.
I remember her having to change the bags twice a day.
Every time they would cut something out, it would grow back. And he tried chemo one time. He tried to shrink them tumors, but that didn't even work. Nothing would work. My chances were above 50% that I would have these tumors, like my dad.
Shad was born in Houston, Texas in 1971 to Lester and Sue Ann Kohler. His medical challenges began the moment he drew his first breath.
I was born with a cleft palate. I did like 9 surgeries altogether, all the way up till I was 18.
He was a great little boy. And when he started school, he loved it.
I played baseball, football, little basketball with the neighbor kids.
He always wanted to go see Grandma because there was always something to do.
My dad and I, we would go hunting a lot. He would take me hunting when I was just 5 or 6 years old. He was a good dad, very good dad.
Over a 10-year period, Lester had 5 major surgeries and was treated with chemotherapy. But nothing the doctors tried could stem the growth of hundreds of tumors inside his body. He could no longer eat, was fed through a tube, and required constant care. Doctors wanted to test Shad and his sister Tara to see if they too carried the gene for Gardner syndrome.
Gardner syndrome is a familial disorder. It's passed on to generations through genetics. We see more of it now, but it's not very common.
At the time, we had no idea that Shad had the genetic makeup he had.
I was at the age of 15 and my sister was 11. We had our first colonoscopy.
We started with examination of his colon because it was probably the highest risk.
I was relieved. I didn't have any polyps or anything.
Shad had evidence of precancerous colonic polyps.
If left alone, they tend to turn into cancer of the colon or large intestine.
Oh, it's devastating. I was scared to death. I didn't know what to expect. Eventually, the doctors did a genetic test.
What we identified, Shad had the genetic markers that predispose him to the most adverse parts of the syndrome.
My chances were above 50% that I would have these tumors, like my dad. seeing what my dad was going through, I just kind of, you know, I felt, wow. I mean, this is what I got to look forward to.
By the time he was 18, Shad Kolar had gone through 9 corrective surgeries for a cleft palate. Shad's father, Lester, was gravely ill from a rare genetic disorder called Gardner syndrome, which caused benign tumors to grow unchecked on his internal organs. And now, tests revealed that Shad, too, was at risk of contracting this hereditary disease. In 1993, Lester slipped into a coma.
April 11th, 1993, Easter morning, he passed away. I was 22 years old. The following year, I did another colonoscopy. My doctor said, well, it looks like it might be time for you to remove your enlarged intestine, which I kind of knew that someday I would have to do it.
If one keeps their colon and does not have the surgery, there's almost a 100% predictable chance of developing colon cancer.
I was hoping for later, not when I was 22.
Another year passed. Shad was due for his annual checkup, which included a CT scan.
Doctors found from my CAT scans 2 tumors. I said, oh man, here we go again.
The second tumor was pressing against Shad's ureter, preventing his kidney from draining properly into his bladder. Shad had surgery to install a stent to correct the problem. But prior to having the procedure, Shad made a difficult decision.
I decided to have that vasectomy done. So I went past taking a chance of passing this to my kids, because I wouldn't want them to suffer like my dad did, and I thought at the time maybe like me. My urologist doctor told me that as long as that tumor is there, I would have to have a stent, and I would have to go in every so often and have it replaced. It's been 15 years. I would go twice, sometimes 3 times a year. I did it so many times I could probably do it myself. In September of 1999, I did a CAT scan, and the scan showed that I had some dark spots on my liver. At first, the doctors told me they was going to watch them. By Christmas time, the doctors wanted me to do a biopsy, and it turned out it was cancer. The name of the cancer was hepatocellular carcinoma, and it was part of Gardner syndrome.
He was found to have a spot on his liver and later referred for hepatic surgery. He had a wedge resection of the tumor-involved area of the liver.
The liver part was something that we hadn't experienced with our father. You know, he had the Gardner syndrome, but it was mainly with the colon and the tumors. But as far as we knew, Dad's liver didn't have any issues.
February of 2000, I had that liver surgery.
As expected, Shad's liver regenerated to its original state. Finally, he felt he was able to get on with his life. A year later, he met a young woman named Michelle.
On our first date, he told me he was looking for a wife. So I guess on our second date, he knew he should tell me what he wanted his wife to know.
Shad and Michelle were married, but their life together seemed incomplete. They longed for a child of their own. They elected to give artificial insemination a try. On December 6th, 2005, Cavender Ray Kolar was born.
Everything was looking good. And then in 2006, I did a CAT scan, and those spots came back again.
But they told him then that he could not have surgery again. They wanted to do the chemoembolism.
Unfortunately, he had recurrence of spots in his liver. The recurrence involved right and left lobes of the liver in critical areas which could not be surgically resected and have him survive that type of operation.
I was real kind of scared about doing the chemo, but I didn't really have a choice.
The chemoembolism is where they go through your groin directly into your liver and inject chemo directly to the spots on your liver.
After that, they put me back in the room, and I asked them if they got them all. They said, yeah, we got them all. And I did a CAT scan 3 months later, and it showed that the spots were white. They got them all. And she wanted me to come in every 3 months. As time went on, 9 months after the chemo, them spots came back again.
And basically they said that, he would either have to have a liver transplant or there would have to be something major that had to be done because they couldn't do the embolization again.
I felt devastated. I didn't know what to do.
They weren't giving us any options. They didn't think the chemoembolism would work again because it gave him 9 months the last time. That's why they were looking at the transplant, but the numbers for survival rate were not good. And despite the fact they've never done a transplant on someone with Gardner syndrome.
So at that point, we were like, oh, well, now what do we do?
Shad was subjected to an exhausting week of tests in order to evaluate his candidacy for a liver transplant. His hopes fell as he faced the stark realization that his setbacks were all too familiar.
I kept picturing in my mind about what Dad went through.
He pulled away from me.
I just wanted to be by myself,
I kept trying to get him to talk to me, but he wouldn't talk to me about it.
He doesn't like to open up too much when he's scared. Mm-hmm. You could see he was scared.
Suicide goes through your head. Next morning, I woke up and thinking about my boy a lot because I want to be here for him. That moment on, I decided I was going to fight this.
Shad Kohler already suffered from Gardner syndrome when he was diagnosed with liver cancer. As treatment after treatment failed, Shad's hope rested in the possibility of a liver transplant, but no one with Gardner syndrome had ever been approved for the surgery. Despondent over his dire circumstances, Shad withdrew from his wife and family. His young son was all that gave him the will to keep on fighting during this time. Shad's cousin told him about a doctor in Houston whose revolutionary new cancer treatment was helping people overcome the disease.
I first heard of Dr. Brzezinski on TV, and Shad's doctors at MD Anderson said, when I told Shad to go to this doctor, he mentioned, it's not going to work. My daughter and him were very close. And I said, Tammy, now I'm going to leave it up to you. You're going to have to go get him and drag him and get him over there.
My cousin talked me into going, at least talking to him.
She just went and said, Shad, get in the car, we're going to see Dr. Brzezinski.
When he came to us, practically he had a death sentence. There was no hope. His prospects were very bad. The survival perhaps no longer than 3 months.
He was honest with us. He said, I don't know how much I can help, but I want to try. Because he had never worked with anyone with Gardner syndrome before either.
If somebody has advanced cancer for which curative treatment is not available, and for instance, somebody who already tried any type of treatment and failed, these are the patients whom we welcome to come.
The family was not excited about it. They thought it was kind of like a hoax.
I guess I was disbelieving that he could help because we had met so many doctors.
I said, Chad, you've got to give it a try. And I do know he did a lot of good things for people. They give you 6 months. If you can get 6 years, that's a long time.
I remember thinking, I wish we could get some type of sign that would tell us which way to go. Because we had the Dr. Brzezinski choice, or we had, the liver transplant choice. So I remember thinking, how do you make that decision?
Then the doctors denied it. Since he had Gardner syndrome, they wouldn't give him one. And gave him about 6 months to live.
I remember feeling a little bit relieved, because then that made our choice. We only had one choice.
So we decided to go try Dr. Brzezinski's treatment.
We evaluated him for what we call personalized gene-targeted therapy. It's the new type of medications which work on the genes which are causing cancer.
Then he put me on his medications.
The ingredient of the medication, which is a prescription medication, this ingredient exists naturally. It's in dairy products, it exists in various vegetables, but the good source of this material is royal jelly, the product of honeybees. So it exists in nature.
It sounded great. It sounded great, non-invasive. They could possibly cure him, and he wouldn't have the surgery. He wouldn't be so sick. He'd be here.
You have two types of genes which are causing cancer. One type are oncogenes, which stimulate cancer, and they are turned on. They have higher activity than normal. The other types of genes are tumor suppressors. They fight cancer, and their activity is turned off. Well, like switches on the thermostat. These medications, they bring the activity of these genes to normal level. They decrease activity of oncogenes and increase activity of tumor suppressors. And that's why they don't affect normal cells, because normal cells, the thermostat is set at certain level. So the thermostat works only when you have too high or too low temperature. And that's how these antioplastons work.
It was not just the medication that he used. He also went on a food program.
He would tell me I would have to eat lots of vegetables.
He did change his diet.
The vegetables that a lot of people don't like. That's what's cancer fighters. If you don't like it, it's good for you.
He said, this is nothing I like. I said, well, healthy food is not always, he likes fried foods. You stay away from that.
Asparagus, I hate it, but that's a good cancer fighter.
We started trying to eat more fish.
And I had to talk to a nutritionist, and she explained what to eat and what not to eat.
Shad's only significant side effect from Dr. Brzezinski's treatment was a urinary tract infection. Doctors replaced his stent and told Shad he would need to have it replaced every 4 months instead of 6.
Twice a year was bad, but now every 4 months I got to go in.
After 3 months, the scan shows that he was already in partial remission, which means his tumor decreased by more than 50%.
Then it was, okay, this is working. We're doing the right thing. We're on the right track.
Something like after 7 months of treatment, all of these tumors were gone.
It was amazing. It was, I did have doubt going into the treatment with Dr. Brzezinski, but it was amazing to see that happened so soon.
So this could be qualified as complete response. And this is very unusual for liver cancer, which fail any treatment. It doesn't happen. These patients, all of them practically die. But in his case, all of these tumors disappeared.
I was very relieved, It was an amazing miracle, really.
The original doctors had told him, you have 4 to 6 months if you don't do our protocol. And here we go to Dr. Brzezinski and less invasive treatment, and a year later, we don't have the tumors to deal with.
Dr. Brzezinski, after that year, he started cutting me back on my medications then.
We placed him on low-dose treatment, which was maintenance treatment. We used this for some time. We repeated his scan. He continued to be at complete response. Nothing showed up. His cancer was gone.
Shad Kolar was born with a cleft palate that required 9 corrective surgeries by the time he was 18. He then battled the effects of Gardner syndrome before being hit with liver cancer. When he was just 36, Shad was told he had 5 years to live. But then he met Dr. Brzezinski, whose targeted gene therapy sent Shad's liver cancer into remission and gave him renewed hope.
It's been 3 years since I've been tumor-free and really cancer-free. I've been very blessed.
He's doing great. He's shown no signs of cancer anywhere in his body, and we've got a 5-year-old that keeps us on our toes.
In medical circles, we are sometimes skeptical or disbelieving when there have been amazing recoveries beyond the expectation of what is known about the natural history of a given tumor or a given condition.
I think these people who have cancer, they should be optimistic because cancer can be cured today.
We always are open to the thoughts and ideas that there are things that we don't know, things that we don't understand.
If I wouldn't have been dead, I would be a very sick man. And I think that's what happened to Dad. He was real healthy, didn't think nothing of it. And those tumors, I think those tumors and all them polyps he had, if he would have caught it early, I believe that he would still be here today.
His father had multiple medical problems, and his parting words were, "Do whatever you can to help my children."
Every patient is unique. It's not like going to Kmart and buying clothes which is the same size or the same type for everybody. This is the treatment where we design the treatment for every patient.
Right now, when I get checked, Those tumors on my small intestine and in my ureter, they're dead, and the spots on my liver are gone.
I think the most encouragement I could give as a spouse, stick there by your husband, because the person that's going through that, a lot of times they are going to pull away from you. They are going to hold things in. Just keep encouraging the conversation. Stay in their face. Don't let them push you out, because they will be back.
Today, I'm very grateful. Very grateful. I'm here talking to you.
Shad still endures the effects of Gardner syndrome, gets PET scans twice a year and annual CT scans, but he's alive. For Michelle, for Cavender, and for his family. Shad is writing an inspirational book about his experiences in life and how important it is to never give up. He envisions opening a country retreat for families to help them with recovery and reconnecting through nature. For more information on Shad Kolar and the Brzezinski Clinic, visit our website. I'm Jewel. Join us next time for another remarkable story of personal triumph on The Incurables.